The rise of Slaba. In the quiet rural town of Hope Springs, there was one name that everyone feared: Slaba. To the outside world, he was just another businessman. But beneath the surface, he was a mafia boss who ruled with absolute power. Slaba had built his empire with his own hands, climbing from the depths of poverty to become one of the most influential figures in the criminal world. He was feared by his enemies, respected by his allies, and constantly calculated every move he made. Yet, no one really knew the man behind the mask. Slaba's rise was not without sacrifices. His journey to the top had always been about choosing between loyalty and power, and he'd chosen power. There was no room for weakness in his world. But, as with any empire, betrayal was inevitable. One of his closest allies, Max, decided he wanted more. Max betrayed Slaba, attempting to take over the business. But Slaba was not the kind of man who could be so easily defeated. With a cold heart, Slaba hunted down those who had betrayed him. But in the process, he found something that would change everything, something he wasn't prepared for: Zuri's struggle and the encounter. Zuri had always lived a life of hardship, first under her father's roof, then under the oppressive hand of her aunt. Her father had passed when she was young, and her aunt, Auntie Ijeoma, had never treated her as anything more than a burden. Zuri was forced to live with the knowledge that she was a tool to be traded for financial gain. Her aunt, desperate to save her family from financial ruin, tried to sell Zuri off to a rich old man. Zuri, however, refused. She wanted more out of life than to be a pawn in someone else's game. But her rejection of the marriage proposal only angered her aunt, who, in a fit of rage, threw Zuri out of the house. Zuri, now homeless, wandered the streets, unsure of where to turn. But the city was cold, and the streets were cruel. In her desperation, Zuri found refuge in a small computer building, where she hoped to escape for just a moment from the world that had betrayed her. That was when fate brought her face to face with Slaba. Slaba was on the run. His mission had failed. Wounded and with enemies on his tail, he rushed into the same building, hoping to find refuge. Zuri, seeing the danger, acted quickly. She hid Slaba and helped tend to his wounds with the little resources she had left. Slaba was impressed, not only by her courage, but by her patience and wisdom. Most people would have panicked, but not Zuri. In that moment, she had the kind of strength Slaba recognized, the kind of strength he once had. He was taken aback by her presence, not expecting someone so young and so resilient to be stuck in such a hopeless situation. Before he left, Slaba handed her a ring, a token of his gratitude and a symbol of a bond neither of them could yet understand. Little did Zuri know, this was only the beginning of her entanglement in a world far more dangerous than she could imagine. Time passed, and while Slaba kept his distance, he couldn't stop thinking about the girl who had saved him. Zuri, now fully aware of the danger that Slaba's world entailed, tried to avoid getting too involved. But the old man, the one her aunt had tried to sell her to, was not done with her. One evening, as Zuri walked down the street, she saw him, her aunt's suitor. He spotted her, and with an evil grin, he grabbed her arm, attempting to force her into his car. She struggled, but the man was too strong. He was going to take her to his club, to do as he pleased. Just as Zuri feared the worst, a figure appeared from the shadows. It was Slaba. His anger flared as he saw the old man trying to take what wasn't his. The fight that ensued was brutal. Slaba, in a fit of rage, destroyed the old man's company, bankrupting him and taking control of his wealth. He was ruthless. In the end, the old man was left with nothing. With the old man out of the picture, Slaba took Zuri with him, offering her protection. She had no choice but to trust him. She was now part of his world, but she wasn't sure what that would mean for her future. The beach, the betrayal, and the rivalry. As Slaba and Zuri spent more time together, a strange bond began to form. But things were never simple in Slaba's world. One day, Slaba decided to take Zuri and his crew to the beach for a moment of relaxation. The sun was setting, casting an orange glow over the waves. The group was laughing and enjoying the moment, but not everyone was at peace. An American girl in Slaba's crew, a woman named Olivia, had taken a strange liking to Zuri. She was openly jealous, seeing the way Slaba looked at her. Olivia, frustrated and feeling betrayed, decided to act. She followed Zuri to the edge of the beach, a look of malice in her eyes. Her plan was simple: push Zuri into the river, out of sight, out of mind. She thought she could eliminate the competition, but Zuri, ever the patient one, wasn't fooled. She noticed Olivia's movements and stepped away just in time. But before Olivia could act, another figure appeared. It was Zuri's best friend, a strong, protective African girl named Amara. Amara had been close to Zuri for years, and she had always watched over her. Without a second thought, Amara slapped Olivia across the face, sending her stumbling backward. The tension in the air was thick. Olivia, enraged, tried to push Amara away, but Slaba stepped in, his cold gaze silencing any further violence. Zuri, though shaken, stayed calm, refusing to let her emotions dictate her actions. The scene left a mark on both Zuri and Slaba. He saw the loyalty in Zuri's friends and began to understand that she was more than just a pawn in his world. But Zuri, while grateful, knew the cost of being close to someone like Slaba. The danger wasn't just physical, it was emotional. Days later, Zuri's aunt, Auntie Ijoma, came knocking on the door of Slaba's mansion. She was a different woman now, humble, almost pleading. She came to apologize, pretending to be a caring mother, asking for Zuri's forgiveness. But Slaba knew better. He saw through the fake humility. Zuri, though still struggling with the emotions of being abandoned, knew her aunt for what she truly was. She looked at Slaba, who gave a subtle nod. Zuri knew what needed to be done. With a cold tone, Slaba had Auntie Ijoma kicked out of the mansion. She was no longer welcome. Zuri didn't need her. The past was behind her now, and Slaba had given her a new world to navigate, one where she would have to decide whether to stay and rise to power or leave it all behind. The final battle for control was coming. Slaba's enemies had grown bolder, and the Mafia world was at risk of falling apart. Zuri, now deeply entwined in this dangerous life, was forced to make a choice. She could stay by Slaba's side and embrace the power and influence he offered, or she could try to leave the world of crime behind. But leaving Slaba wasn't an option, at least not yet. She had become too important in his world. And as the power struggle intensified, Zuri realized that in this world, loyalty meant survival, but it also meant sacrifice. As the Mafia world teetered on the brink of collapse, Slaba found himself facing betrayal from all sides. His empire, once unshakable, was now under siege. Rival factions, sensing weakness, began to make their moves. But Slaba's most shocking betrayal came from within his inner circle. His most trusted lieutenant, Max, the very same man who had once betrayed him, had secretly returned to reclaim his position. Slaba had always been a man who saw betrayal coming from a mile away, but this time it took him by surprise. Max, who had been pretending to work alongside Slaba once again, had secretly allied with a rival faction. Together, they planned to take Slaba down from the inside, using Zuri as a pawn in their scheme. They knew that Slaba's soft spot for her would be his downfall. One evening, as Slaba prepared for a high-stakes meeting with his allies, Zuri received a message from Max. He offered her a deal, freedom and a chance to escape the violence, if she agreed to work with him. Zuri was torn. She had grown to trust Slaba, but she couldn't deny that the world he had brought her into was dangerous, too dangerous for someone like her. But Zuri, being the resilient woman she was, wasn't going to be used again. She knew better than to fall for Max's manipulation. In a bold move, she confronted Slaba and revealed everything: Max's plan, his betrayal, and the truth behind his manipulation of her. Slaba's reaction was a mix of shock, anger, and regret. He had trusted Max, but he had been blind to the treachery brewing in his midst. With Zuri's help, Slaba confronted Max in a final showdown. The battle was fierce, and the bloodshed was inevitable. Max, desperate and cornered, tried to flee, but Slaba and his crew tracked him down, ending the traitor's reign once and for all. Slaba stood victorious, but the toll of betrayal had left deep scars. With Max eliminated, Slaba's empire was left vulnerable. His enemies, emboldened by his moment of weakness, launched a coordinated attack on his business. It was a relentless assault from all angles: financial, personal, and even legal. Slaba realized that, to survive, he would need to rebuild everything from the ground up. But he was not the same man who had risen to power years ago. Zuri, now more confident and experienced, stood by his side. She had earned her place in Slaba's world, not as a pawn, but as a partner. Together, they started making plans to rebuild Slaba's empire. But this time, they would do it differently. The lessons from their past, the betrayals, the lies, those would not be forgotten. Zuri had learned from Slaba. She had learned that loyalty, while important, could also be a weakness. She had seen how power corrupted, how trust could be a dangerous thing, especially in the underworld. She knew that survival came down to more than just being loyal to one man. It came down to having the strength to make difficult decisions, even if it meant sacrificing everything. But as Slaba's empire started to rebuild, Zuri found herself at a crossroads. She had the power to take over. She could rise to the top, claim Slaba's legacy, and rule the world of crime herself. But was that the life she truly wanted? The offer was tempting. The world of crime was all she had ever known. It had consumed her father, it had consumed her aunt, and now it was slowly consuming Slaba. Zuri, though, wasn't sure if she wanted to follow the same path. She had seen what power could do to a person, how it could twist and destroy them. And as much as Slaba had changed her life, she couldn't deny that he too had been consumed by the power he craved. In a moment of clarity, Zuri made her decision. She would leave the Mafia world behind. She would take the lessons she had learned and use them to build a life for herself, one that didn't involve betrayal, lies, or violence. But Slaba, knowing he couldn't let go of his empire so easily, tried to convince her to stay. He offered her more power, more influence, everything she had ever dreamed of. But Zuri, with a heavy heart, turned him down. "I can't," she said softly. "I'm not you, Slaba. I don't want to be." Slaba looked at her, his face filled with understanding and sorrow. He knew she was right. He had lost himself long ago. But for Zuri, this was her chance to start anew. Zuri disappeared from the criminal world as quietly as she had entered it. She moved to a new city, taking up a new name, a new life. She would always carry the scars of her past, but she had learned that the real power came from letting go, from choosing a different path. As for Slaba, he rebuilt his empire, but the cracks in his empire were too deep to fix. The world he had built with blood and betrayal was slowly crumbling around him. He had chosen power, and in the end, it was the one thing he couldn't control. Slaba disappeared from the public eye, leaving behind a legacy of fear, power, and regret. The world of crime moved on without him, and Zuri, free from the shackles of her past, moved on as well. The story ended with one final lesson. True strength doesn't come from power, money, or loyalty. It comes from knowing when to walk away, when to let go, and when to choose a different path.